When first looking into what I wanted to do for this assessment, I both looked into instruments I hadn't recorded before and then instruments I record often. I wanted to look into different ways I can record them. Finally, I wanted to use the equipment within the studios that I hadn't used before, for instance the Kemper and the built-in compressor within the Studios One's SSL desk. First thing that I wanted to look into was recording acoustic guitar. I've recorded guitar a lot before, but only ever with two microphones that are large diaphragm condensers in spaces that aren't well controlled. I want to change this and try to use different types of microphones, and now with acoustic paneling to control the space. This should create a drier recording and allow me to layer and add extra effects like reverb afterwards. The next instrument that I want to record is right-up piano. I've never recorded piano before, but I enjoy hearing recordings and using it in my own productions. I refer back to artists such as Rex Orange County and Slaughter Beach Dog when creating a piano sound. Both of these artists have different piano tones. Rex Orange County usually uses a lot of natural reverb from large church rooms, which can be seen in this video of him recording in the church studios. In this video, we can see him constantly using the large diaphragm condensers, such as the Newman U87. Slaughter Beach Dog, however, has more of a home studio sound that most likely uses digital reverb to create its space for piano. This means I'm going to have to take a range of approaches when creating different types of spaces in the live room, using the wood back of the panels when I want a reverberant room, and then using acoustic panels when I want to create a dead space. To get these tones, I'll have to use a range of microphones, some close to the piano and then some further away in stereo pair to capture the room as well. The final recording I'll be doing will be using the Kemper to record both the guitar and bass. Along with this, I would use reamping techniques using the Vox AC30 as my amplifier. From here, I could change the sound more with different microphones and settings on the amp. However, the Kemper already comes with microphone presets. For instance, one of the first Kemper presets is a clean sound with a Royale R121, and then the same with an SM57. There are other amp simulators I could use, for instance the Line 6 Pod and the Contact Guitar Rig 6. Let's start by looking at what I did to record the acoustic guitar. There are 4 different recordings I did, all with different setups. The first recording was with 3 different small diaphragm cardioid microphones, the SM57 and then 2 Beta 57As. The reasons for this choice was to see if I could hear a difference in the recordings from small diaphragms to large. It also lined up that these microphones are in a completely different price range to the large diaphragm microphones I also used. For the guitar tone that I was going for, I wanted to be close and personal with the guitar, ensuring that you could hear the change from chord to chord as I played. I would also want to create a warm, breathy tone. This can be heard in the track Heartbeats by Jose Gonzalez. From here, I decided that my first microphone position was going to be up near the headstock of the guitar. This placement was 3 inches away from the fretboard to ensure that you could hear my fingers changing on the strings. The next placement that I decided to use was near the sound hole of the guitar. This will most likely be used as the main part of my 3 microphone sound. This is because the sound hole is the main source of the acoustic guitar. The final position for my microphones is just behind the bridge of the guitar. For me, this is more of an experimental position, since a lot of the sound happens around the middle and top near the 7th fret of the guitar. But what are we missing behind near the back end of the guitar?
For the second recording, I decided on using large diaphragm condenser microphones in the same positions. Each microphone that I was using had polar patterns that I could change. To ensure that I was capturing the room and guitar, I decided to use the omnidirectional mode for each microphone. This means they capture the space behind the microphone as well. This means I'll capture some of the room sound. My first microphone was the AKG C414. This was at the headstock of the guitar, capturing a wide array of the neck to get the sound of moving fingers again. The second is the Newman U87. This microphone has been used by an array of artists and engineers such as Bob Clearmountain. In this video demo, we can see him using the U87 closely to the sound hole of the guitar to capture the warmth of the acoustic. The third microphone that I used for the back of the guitar was again the AKG C414. The main reason for this was that I wanted to see if there was a difference between the sound of the guitar at the top and the bottom. These 2 microphones are placed equal distance away from the guitar and were on the same settings. For the final part of recording acoustic guitar, I decided that I would use the acoustic boards to my full advantage. During the first recording, I allowed for a lot of space in the room with maximum amount of reflections by turning the panels on the walls to the wooden side to increase reflections. For this recording, I want to do the complete opposite, creating a dead space that could be used to add alternate reverbs on later. This was done by using 3 different close panels to the microphones and then ensuring that the acoustic panels on the wall were facing outward. It was very immediate hearing the change in my room whilst playing. When recording piano, I decided to do incredibly different setups like I did for my recording of acoustic guitar. The first recording was done with 2 Sennheiser MD4351 dynamic microphones close to the piano, and then 5 feet back from the piano and 3 feet apart from each other, there were 2 AKG C414 microphones. They were both kept level to one another. The Sennheiser microphones were both focused towards the hammers and strings. This is the main source of sound for the piano. These Sennheiser microphones have a cardioid polar pattern, meaning they are able to capture the space in front of them, and from behind, they're able to block out sound. This is where the AKG microphones came in. I decided that these microphones would be there to capture the room sound from different recordings. Both microphones during this recording were set to omnidirectional with no cut-in frequencies. This allowed me to capture the entire room and then add it slowly to my mix. During this more spacious recording, I also decided to take the wood panels off the piano to open it up. For the version of the recording with acoustic paneling, I decided to put the wood panels of the piano back on to cover up the strings. I also didn't move the microphones and recorded through the wood. Also, to decrease the reflections behind the microphone, I decided to put acoustic panels behind the microphone. From here, I decided to change the panels on the walls back onto the carpeted side. However, next time recording, I would put the carpet back under the piano to see if it would change the sound. When listening to both recordings, there is a clear difference in sound. For the final track, I decided to do a traditional indie style song with guitar and drums. For this, I first wanted to record through the Kemper on guitar. After this, I would reamp the guitar through the Vox AC30. However, the rack-mounted Kemper was difficult to use and set up. However, we did find some great sounds within the Kemper that I really want to use next time I'm recording. For guitar, I decided to use Contact Guitar Rig 6. This guitar rig simulator has a few different guitar amps based inside of it. This guitar rig simulator has a few different amps within it. However, the best sounding one that I found was the Marshall-based amplifier called Jump. It has an amazing high-end sound that seems to emulate the guitar tone from bands like Two Door Cinema Club and Block Party. From here, I was able to play around with the settings for a while, and then added a range of my own pedals to the rig to make sure each guitar had its own part and tone. For the lead, I decided to use my own PRS SE Starler. This solid body guitar has 2 DS-02 humbucker pickups with 3-way selectors and coil taps. This is perfect for a lead part since these pickups allow for easy breakup with distortion, and if I need to change the sound quickly, I can use the coil tap to change my humbuckers into single coils, which have a drastically different sound comparatively. When recording the rhythm parts, I use my Epiphone semi-hollow 335. This larger guitar has a hollow body that adds more warmth to the guitar tone and has more space to be compared to a solid body, which is quite tight. Now, let's talk about mixing the acoustic guitar with no acoustic panels and small diaphragm microphones. I started by using EQ on all 3 microphones. For the headstock and back microphones, I decided to use a low-end cut at 100 Hz. This was to get rid of any mud from these recordings. For the EQ on the microphone that was next to the sound hole, I only did a cut at 75 Hz. This was to keep the deepness of the sound. This is also why I had small low cut at 2 kHz and a thin deep cut at 4 kHz. This was to get rid of the high end of the guitar that I could then add back from the headstock and neck microphones. I only added a small amount of reverb on the main microphone that was next to the sound hole of the guitar. For this, I made a large cut at the top of the end of the reverb and then brought down the wet level to 10%. From here, I also brought up the low end of the reverb to thicken up the tone. I didn't add any more reverb than this because I wanted it to come from the room. Finally, when it came to compression on the acoustic guitar, the only preference I have is using the vintage Opto and Platinum digital compressors within Logic, since they both give off a warm feeling on the guitars. For the second recording of the acoustic guitar, this time with acoustic paneling, the EQ is mainly the same for the main microphone next to the sound hole. I made cuts in the high end, which was later brought up by the 2 other microphones. However, this time I found myself pushing the EQ around 2.5 kHz more with the headstock microphone compared to there being no acoustic panels. This shows that the acoustic panels do take away some of the high end that surround the space. When it came to mixing the large diaphragm microphones, I could already tell before even adding effects that there was a large change in sound. This recording seemed more open and there was more tonal content within the recordings. When it came to using EQ, I decided to use the same techniques, cutting the low on the AKG microphones at 100 Hz and then lower at 73 Hz for the Neumann microphone. When mixing the piano, I started by panning each microphone to the correct side. This immediately opened up the sound in stereo. From here, I decided to use some EQ to first get rid of those low muddy tones at 100 Hz, and then following the advice of Greg Wells in Mix with the Masters, boosting the high end at 1.9 kHz and 5.5 kHz. In this video, we can see also that he uses large diaphragm condensers to capture the piano. From here, I decided to use Logic's Platinum digital compressor with an incredibly high attack to add more punch to the piano. This makes the piano hit harder when each chord hits. I also decided to use the Silver Verb reverb on the AKG room microphones. I used Silver Verb over the other reverbs so that I could add more specific low and high end cuts to the reverb, and so that I could change the room size specifically instead of generally like some of the reverbs do. For EQ, I decided to this time use Logic's vintage console EQ. This allows for a more varied focusing on different places. Using this on the microphones closer to the piano meant I decided to boost some of the low end to make a deeper, punchier sound. Finally, when mixing electric guitar, one of the most important effects I used was the noise gate. Using this amplifier and pedals meant that the noise could come from more cables. Along with this was the dynamic processor and multi-band compressor. The multi-band compressor focused on different bands to then compress instead of the whole sound. From here, I used the dynamic processor to compress the whole sound instead. For the breakdown section, with just the guitar on its own, I used the chroma reverb in concert hall mode to create more space. This I couldn't do on my pedal board. The only thing I added there was phaser from my Mua 90 Orange. This pedal is based on the popular MXR phaser. If I was to do this project again, I would have done another recording of the acoustic guitar that blended all these techniques together, having large and small diaphragm microphones with acoustic panels. I would also want to use analog compressors and EQ that come with the SSL desk instead of the digital ones I used in Logic. Thank you.